The Forgotten House in the Woods. You've probably heard of this place. Many legends surround it, and most people dismiss them as just scary stories. But some claim the tales are true, terrifyingly true. This story is about a house, hidden deep in the woods far from any path or human eyes. It's abandoned, yet not empty. When I stumbled upon this story on Reddit, I felt chills running down my spine. The author swore they had seen this house with their own eyes. Here's their account: haunting, gripping, and unnervingly real. The author decided to go on a solo hike, hoping to escape the chaos of the city. They chose a new route that led deep into the forest, searching for solitude and peace. At first, everything seemed normal. Sunlight streaming through the leaves, the path smooth and clear, and the scent of pine in the air. But the further they ventured, the more the atmosphere began to change. The sounds of birds and insects faded into an eerie silence. Even the wind seemed to avoid this place. Yet the author pressed on, even when the path disappeared entirely, swallowed by the dense forest. And that's when they saw it: the house. It was an old, crumbling structure, almost camouflaged by the overgrowth of trees and vines. The wooden walls were blackened with age, the roof sagging on one side, and moss crept up every surface. For the first time, the author felt a cold unease, a warning to turn back. But curiosity won. As they approached, the front door stood ajar, as if beckoning them inside. When they stepped closer, the faint breeze pushed the door open with a loud creak, echoing through the forest like a warning cry. Inside, the house felt lifeless, yet strangely alive. The walls were streaked with mold, the floor covered in a thick layer of dust that left footprints with every step. Bookshelves stood half-collapsed, their contents strewn across the floor, pages torn and yellowed with time. In the center of the room, on an old wooden table, something stood out: a candle, new and untouched, and beside it, a note. They picked it up with trembling hands and read, "If you're reading this, don't stay. You're in danger." Each word struck like a blow. They wanted to run but felt frozen in place, gripped by a morbid curiosity to know more. The staircase leading to the second floor was rickety, each step groaning loudly under their weight. Halfway up, they heard a sound behind them, a faint creak, then a distinct footstep. They froze. Turning around, they saw nothing but shadows. The second floor had 3 rooms. In the first was a broken wardrobe, its door swinging slightly as if it had just been closed. In the second, a shattered window let in a sliver of dim light. The floor bore strange stains, dark and dried, resembling old blood. But it was the third room that was the most unsettling. On the wall hung a large mirror, cloudy and streaked. In the reflection, they saw themselves, and something else, a shadow. It stood behind them, vaguely human in shape but faceless, its edges blurry. It moved, though the room was empty. The author turned around quickly, but there was nothing. When they looked back at the mirror, the shadow had moved closer, as if staring directly at them. They bolted from the house, leaping down the stairs 2 at a time, and ran through the forest until they saw a clearing that led back to the trail. Later, they tried to learn more about the place. Through research, they discovered that the house was located deep in a forest near a small town called Grayford. The forest was infamous for strange occurrences: missing hikers, screams echoing at night, and unexplained lights in the trees. If you ever find yourself near Grayford, stay away from the forest. The house, it waits for visitors, and if you step inside, If you thought the first story was chilling, just wait until you hear the next one. The tale of the Forgotten House in the Woods still lingers in your mind, but sometimes true terror doesn't wait for you in the wilderness. Sometimes it whispers to you from within your own home, ready to uncover how an innocent whisper can turn into a waking nightmare. Let's dive in. Whispers in the Dark. When I first read this story on Reddit, it shook me to my core. It was so eerie and vivid that I couldn't sleep all night. Maybe it'll do the same to you. The author, Anna, recounted strange events from her childhood in the old family home. Built in the 19th century, the house's walls seemed to hold secrets from its past. Anna grew up with the usual memories of family life, warm evenings by the fireplace and cheerful childhood games. But when she turned 16, things began to change. The first sign was the whispers. Faint, barely audible murmurs, as if someone were speaking far away through the walls. At first, Anna thought it was just the wind slipping through the old cracks in the house. But over time, the whispers grew louder, clearer. One night, she distinctly heard her name. "Anna!" The whisper swept through the room like a cold draft. She sat up in bed, her heart pounding, but there was no one there. The house was silent, too silent, as if it were watching her. Weeks passed. The whispers were replaced by strange noises, knocking, creaking, and rustling. It felt as though something was moving behind the walls. Anna tried to follow the sounds, but they kept shifting, as if the house were alive. One night, as she lay in bed, she heard a loud bang behind her head, as if someone had pounded their fist on the wall. Summoning all her courage, Anna shouted, "Who's there?" The whispers stopped instantly. But seconds later, a low, guttural voice replied, speaking a language she couldn't understand. It was deep and menacing, resonating through the walls. The next day, Anna decided to check the attic, where she thought the noises were coming from. The attic was the most terrifying part of the house. It was pitch black, and the old wooden hatch creaked as if it were protesting her decision. When she climbed up, she found an old doll in the center of the attic. Its faded eyes stared directly at her, and its lips were twisted into a sinister half-smile. Next to the doll was a note. It read, "Why did you leave me?" Anna had no idea what it meant. She tried throwing the doll away the next day, but the following morning, it was back in the attic. From that point on, her nights became unbearable. Every time she closed her eyes, she would hear footsteps approaching her bed. The post ended with the author's haunting warning. That house still stands. If you ever find yourself in Black Hollow, stay far away from the house on Livingston Street. They say it still whispers at night. Sometimes the horrors around us are quiet and almost unnoticeable, like whispers in the dark. But what if fear took shape, standing directly in front of you? What if one day you met it face to face? The next story is about a strange figure that appeared on the road, a tale that chills to the core. Story 3. The Figure on the Road. When I stumbled upon this story on Reddit, it left me deeply shaken. It's not just frightening, it makes you question how close we sometimes come to something beyond comprehension. The author recounted a late-night drive through the forest and the terrifying encounter that changed their life forever. It was around midnight, and the author was driving along an empty road cutting through a dense forest. The road was pitch black, with no streetlights, and the only illumination came from the car's headlights, which barely pierced the fog hanging low to the ground. The forest seemed alive, its tall trees forming an eerie tunnel overhead. Visibility was poor, so the author slowed the car, creeping cautiously forward. Then, out of nowhere, they saw it. A figure standing at the edge of the road. At first, it looked like a person. They were dressed in old, tattered clothes, standing eerily still and facing the road. The author slowed the car, thinking the person might need help. But as the headlights illuminated the figure's face, they froze. The face was human, but distorted. The mouth stretched unnaturally wide, reaching from ear to ear, and the eyes glowed faintly in the dark. Panic set in, and the author floored the gas pedal, desperate to get away. But just a few kilometers later, the figure appeared again, this time in the middle of the road. They slammed on the brakes, heart pounding, trying to comprehend how it could have gotten there ahead of them. Then the figure started walking toward the car, slowly but deliberately. The author didn't wait to find out what would happen next. Swerving around the figure, they sped off, but in the rearview mirror they could see it standing there, still watching them. When they finally reached home, they learned that the road was infamous for strange sightings. Locals claimed to have seen a wanderer who either stood motionless or followed them. Those who tried to stop and speak with it were never seen again. You've heard about the figure on the road, a haunting presence that seems to follow. But what if danger doesn't chase you in the dark, but instead comes disguised as something familiar? The next story is about a situation where a wrong decision could have had irreversible consequences, a tale that chills you to the bone. Story 4, The Wrong Bus. I came across this story on Reddit, and it left me deeply unsettled. It's not about ghosts or monsters, but perhaps that's what makes it even scarier, because this could happen to anyone. The author recounted an event from their childhood, an ordinary school day that could have taken a dark and irreversible turn. It was winter, on an especially foggy morning. The author's mother usually woke them up early so they could get dressed, eat breakfast, and head to the bus stop in time. But on this particular day, she overslept. The time was already 6:50 a.m., and the bus usually arrived at 7 a.m. There was no way the author could get ready in just 10 minutes. So the mother decided she'd drive them to school instead. As they sat eating breakfast, they suddenly heard the familiar sound of the school bus pulling up. But something was off. It was too early. The bus had arrived almost 10 minutes ahead of schedule. The mother peeked out the window. Sure enough, the bus was there, its bright yellow body visible through the heavy fog. She stepped outside to tell the driver they wouldn't be riding that day. But when the door opened, she saw a man she didn't recognize. This man was a stranger. He wore a school bus driver's uniform, but there was something odd about him. His movements were stiff, and he stared at her with an unsettling intensity. "I'm the substitute driver," he said. "The regular driver called in sick today." Something didn't feel right. "We're not going today," the mother replied firmly. "I'll take my son myself." The man didn't leave. He kept glancing at her and then at the house, as if trying to see inside. Finally, he said, "I can wait." She took a step back, about to close the door, when he added, "Is your son ready?" Those words sent a chill down her spine. She slammed the door shut and immediately called the police, though she wasn't sure what to report. Minutes later, another school bus arrived. This time it was the real one, with the regular driver they knew. The stranger and his bus had vanished. The driver was horrified to hear what had happened. No substitute driver had been assigned to his route, and the police confirmed no other buses were dispatched that morning. The author ended the story with this chilling thought. Years later, I learned that several children had gone missing along that road. If my mom had let me board that bus, I might have been one of them. I've never looked at school buses the same way since. The story of the wrong bus made us realize how close we can come to danger without knowing it. But sometimes fear doesn't lurk outside, it hides deep underground. The next story takes us into the dark, where footsteps in silence might be the last thing you hear. Are you ready to descend into the tunnels? Let's begin. Story 5. Footsteps Underground. I found this story on Reddit, and it left me shaken. It's about a place that feels alive, as if it has a mind of its own, underground tunnels where something doesn't want you to leave. The author described how during summer break, they and a group of friends decided to explore an old drainage tunnel near their neighborhood. It was a typical teenage dare, to face their fears and see who could go the farthest inside. The tunnel was hidden at the edge of town, its rusted metal gate broken open long ago. "Nothing down there but old pipes," one friend said. "The workers abandoned it years ago." But older residents told a different story. They claimed the tunnels stretched for miles, once used as part of the town's utilities. Then accidents started happening, and they were sealed off. That day, the group brought flashlights, snacks, and cameras, hoping to document anything interesting. At first, it was fun. The tunnel was wide, and the cool air was a welcome break from the summer heat. They laughed and joked as they walked deeper inside. But as they ventured further, the tunnel grew quieter. Their voices no longer echoed, and the beam from their flashlights seemed weaker. The author wrote about a growing unease, a sense of tension that settled over them like a heavy blanket. About an hour in, they noticed something strange. Deep scratches ran along the walls, as if something with claws had scraped through the concrete. One of the scratches was so deep you could fit a finger inside. The group dismissed it as the work of animals, though they couldn't imagine what kind of creature could do such a thing. Then came the sound. A loud, rhythmic thudding echoed through the tunnel, as if someone was walking toward them. The sound grew louder, closer. "Who's there?" one friend shouted, shining their flashlight ahead. The beam revealed only the endless corridor. The footsteps stopped. But now there was a rustling above them, like something crawling along the pipes overhead. One of the friends whispered, "We should leave. Now." They turned back, but before they'd gone 10 meters, the footsteps returned, this time behind them. The author spun their flashlight around, but the corridor was empty. Then they saw it. From around a corner, 30 meters away, a figure emerged. It was tall, its arms impossibly long, nearly dragging along the ground. It stood perfectly still. The group screamed and ran. The footsteps they heard were now coming from every direction, as if the walls themselves were alive. When they finally burst out of the tunnel into the open air, there was only silence. But as they turned back, they saw the figure standing at the entrance. It didn't follow. It just stood there, watching, before vanishing into the shadows. The author ended their story with a chilling note. "We never went back to that tunnel, but I still hear the footsteps when I'm falling asleep, reminding me that I wasn't supposed to make it out."